Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Pennsylvania Growing Greener Coalition, the state's largest coalition of conservation, recreation, and preservation organizations, I want to welcome all of you to the city of Harrisburg. For the past 7 years, I have had the pleasure of serving as this coalition's executive director. For 7 years, we have been advocating for a renewed Growing Greener program. And for the first time in 7 years, we're hosting an event like this. This is exciting. This is exciting for me. I don't always get to do this. The Keep Pennsylvania Growing Greener Rally, a rally around a program that for nearly 20 years has cleaned our streams, protected our lands, grown our economy, and strengthened our communities. A program that has funded hundreds of local parks and trails, conserved more than 80,000 acres of open space, restored hundreds of miles of streams and waterways, protected more than 78,000 acres of farmland, restored more than 1,600 acres of abandoned mines, reduced flooding and water pollution through more than 400 watershed protection projects. But we are not here just to celebrate the accomplishments of Growing Greener. We still have much work that needs to be done. Funding for the Growing Greener program is at an all-time low, down 75% from where it was just a decade ago. We have 19,000 miles of streams and rivers that are impaired. Abandoned mines scar nearly 200,000 acres, causing more than 5,500 miles of dead streams and rivers. More than 1,800 family farms remain on a waiting list to be protected. And the majority of the state's 6,000 local parks and more than 11,000 miles of trails need significant upgrades. This is what brings us all here together today. And this is also what brings our speakers here together today. And I'm not going to give lengthy introductions for each one. I'm going to allow their words to speak for themselves. And first, I'd like to introduce one of our legislative champions, Senator Tom Killian from Chester County.
Thank you, Andrew, and I'm pleased to be here. Andrew laid it out. We're not looking to reinvent the wheel here. We've had two extremely successful programs in Growing Greener 1 and Growing Greener 2. And as Andrew laid out, we're running out of money. We need to pass Growing Greener 3 so we continue to make Pennsylvania beautiful. See, imagine I'm from Chester and also Delaware County, live in Delaware County, and we've put a lot of resources into our area, which has grown, but the trails we have, the open space we have, has increased the quality of life, it's increased home values, our children have a place to go and play, our streams are cleaner. We can't stop now. I am so pleased to see so many people up here advocating for Growing Greener 3, and all of us working together, me in the Senate with my colleagues McElhenney and Alloway and my good friends in the House. We could get this done. We could get this done, and with your help, we will get this done. Let's pass Growing Greener 3.
Thank you, Senator Killian. I know a hearing is just getting out in the building, so I'm trying to keep an eye on some other senators that may be joining us. We have some representatives here as well who are planning on introducing similar legislation in the House that we're introducing in the Senate. So I'd like to introduce right now Representative Alex Carlton from Delaware County. Thanks, Alex.
Thanks, Andy. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you all for being here and supporting this important piece of legislation that we're working on. I won't belabor you with all of the facts and figures. I think Andy laid out the majority of them. But to echo Senator Killian's sentiments, this is an important piece of legislation for our state. This is something that impacts our health, our well-being, our economy throughout this state. Doesn't matter where you live, you have a benefit by having this legislation passed. The funding is needed. It's needed now. The environment can't wait, unfortunately. We can't wait until there's more funding coming through the state. You know, we have an important budget right now, and the funds are limited. This is some of the areas where the money needs to go. With your support, we'll be able to get there. It's important that we protect our waterways, protect our green space, and provide the benefits that our economy sees through a result of this. So thank you all for being here. I hope to see this move through. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Representative Carlton. So we'll be introducing a Growing Greener 3 framework legislation in the House, and we will have 4 prime sponsors. It is a bipartisan effort. Representative Carlton is one of them, and our next guest is the second, and that is Representative Mike Carroll from Luzerne County.
All right, Andrew, thank you so much. It's a great honor to be here today with all of you in support of this wonderful, wonderful initiative. In Luzerne County and in northeastern Pennsylvania and across the state, we've had many, many success stories with respect to growing greener. But success doesn't mean completion. There are other projects that are equally important that have to be attacked and have to be completed that will ensure a wonderful, healthy environment for our future generations. So I'm pleased to join with my colleagues in the House and the Senate to advance this wonderful policy to make sure that our state does grow greener and that we continue the wonderful successes that we've had in the past with prior growing greener initiatives. Let's bring this one to the forefront and get it done. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Representative Carroll. Also in the House, serving as a prime sponsor of the legislation is all of our good friend, Representative Bob Freeman from Northampton County. Hey, sir.
Thank you, Andrew. Bob, Robert, works either way, but thank you. I'm pleased to be here and to join with my colleagues in sponsoring this very important piece of legislation and to move forward the need for this very, very critical environmental agenda. There is a real need in Pennsylvania for increased investment in our conservation efforts, recreation, preservation efforts, historic preservation, and also creating sustainable communities through proper levels of funding. Our legislation will allow agencies to address growing needs in these areas, to expand the current distribution of the environmental stewardship funds, to include additional state agencies and programs such as the Game Commission, the Fish and Boat Commission, Historic Preservation, and of course DCED and its Main Street and Elm Street programs, all in order to address these very critical needs. And we must also allow current agencies who receive Growing Greener funds to use those funds for additional essential programs in these areas as well. This legislation, this proposal, will be a major step forward in being able to achieve and to realize Growing Greener objectives and goals, something that we have to keep in an ongoing way. With this legislation, we can ensure that the work of conserving land and water resources, of restoring damaged waterways and land, and creating prosperous and sustainable communities here in Pennsylvania can be accomplished through these goals and will be an ongoing achievement for all the citizens of Pennsylvania. This will enhance their quality of life. And in the Keystone State, we must think in terms of doing that, not only for this generation, but for all future generations to come. Growing Greener 3 achieves that objective. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Freeman. Also, the fourth prime sponsor for the legislation will be Representative Hal English, who couldn't be here today. I don't believe I saw him. No. There's a lot going on in the Capitol building today, if you have not already heard. So, our next speaker I want to introduce is a co-sponsor of the Senate bill, and also has introduced a co-sponsorship memo for a fair and responsible severance tax on natural gas that will allocate a portion of its revenues to the Environmental Stewardship Fund for Growing Greener. Senator Yudichak is a prime sponsor of that, along with Senator Killian. And I'd like to introduce Senator Yudichak to the podium, please. Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Thank you, and good morning. What a beautiful day in Harrisburg. A bipartisan day, a bicameral day, where senators and representatives, Democrats and Republicans, have come together in agreement. It happens all the time here in Harrisburg. Doesn't happen too often, but on the Growing Greener program since 1999, it has happened. Democrats and Republicans coming together around a sound idea that makes investments and brings together unique groups in Pennsylvania. How many programs can bring together environmentalists that value sustainable ecosystem and protecting the environment with capitalists and businessmen and women across Pennsylvania who recognize that investing in Pennsylvania's natural resources is an investment in a sustainable economy? I've been blessed to be born and raised in northeastern Pennsylvania and to represent the good people of northeastern Pennsylvania. I've lived in the shadow of anthracite my entire life. I understand its legacy, and I've lived it. My grandfather was an anthracite miner. My father was an anthracite miner. And I've grown up in the shadow of an Avondale mine pit that has now been reclaimed. An entire mountaintop in northeastern Pennsylvania reclaimed because of groups like the Earth Conservancy that works with DEP and DCNR through investments in the Growing Greener program. Thousands of acres of abandoned mine land have been reclaimed. Miles of polluted acid mine drainage streams have been restored. All of it because of the Growing Greener program. Regrettably, those funds, however, have diminished over the decades. Even though the tasks and challenges of our environment and investing in our economy have grown greater, the funds have grown less. Senator Killian, my friend from my days in the House and now my colleague in the Senate, has put forward Senate Bill 705, the reboot and refocus of Growing Greener in a new form, Growing Greener 3. We're working together on a fair and responsible severance tax to help fund that program because we have $315 million in annual needs that can be supported through a new, rebooted Growing Greener 3 program. I am proud to stand with you, the members of the Growing Greener Coalition, to keep the fight going, to keep Pennsylvania going greener. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That deserves a huge cheer. That was wonderful. Thank you. We have another representative that I would like to invite up to the podium as Representative Gene DiGeronimo. I always kind of mumble your last name, and I'm so sorry about that.
No, you said it perfectly.
From a good friend from the Southeast, where I'm from. I'm from Delaware County. Did you know that I'm from Delaware County? Media.
No, we did not.
Alex and I went to the same high school. Yeah, different years though. So, but please, thanks. Thanks for joining
just
us.
real quickly, good to be with everybody today. You know, it's especially uplifting to see the young people that are here today, right? Because isn't it protecting the environment about protecting their future also? So thank you all for being here today. And again, many of us, my colleagues in the House and Senate managers, this is not a partisan issue. Protecting the environment should be a bipartisan issue. And I'll be honest, I am just so proud I had the highest environmental scorecard and rating in the Republican caucus last session. I'm very, very proud of that. And this bill, Growing Greener 3, I mean, it's important we get this passed, but it's always about how you're going to pay for everything up here in Harrisburg. And we're going to struggle putting this budget together. But I'll tell you what, the place we should go for the revenue is putting, as been said before, a reasonable and fair tax on the Marcellus Shale gas industry. That's the way we should be paying for it. And I also have a bill in the House where I put a 3.2% tax on top of the impact fee. And I think it's important that we leave the impact fee in place because it's doing a lot of good things for environmental programs also. But we should be putting a fair and reasonable tax on top of the impact fee and use part of that revenue to fund programs like Growing Greener. I mean, I think that's the responsible thing to do. And hopefully as part of this budget process, we're going to be able to get that done. So good to be with you, and I support you 100% on what you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you. There are a number of potential revenue sources that could go towards funding a Growing Greener 3 program. And our next speaker, I hope, will touch a little bit on some of the things that he has advocated for. It's John Arway, from the Executive Director of the Pennsylvania Fish and Boat Commission. Where are you, John? Great. Thank you very much.
Well, thanks, Andrew. It's a great opportunity to join you today on a beautiful day in Pennsylvania. And first and foremost, I'd like to thank Andrew for all the hard work that he's done keeping this on track. Without people like Andrew and those that stand here with signs and on the steps of the Capitol, this would only be a dream, not a reality. And we've gone through two versions, and hopefully we'll get Growing Greener 3 done here in the near future. I'd also like to thank the legislative champions on both sides of the aisle and in both chambers for keeping this in discussion in the legislature. A lot of people may wonder, what does green have to do with fishing and boating in Pennsylvania? And probably the father of conservation in our country, Aldo Leopold, said it best when he said, you can't disconnect our lands from our waters. And when you look right down the path, you can see the Susquehanna River here and as a backdrop to this discussion. And Leopold recognized that we have to protect our land in order to protect our water. And we've got 86,000 miles of streams and rivers in Pennsylvania to protect and manage, second most only to Alaska in the country. And it's a huge challenge, especially in times when we're looking for revenue. And it's never easy to fund growth programs like this or continued programs like this, but one of the things, along with the Marcellus Shale impact fee that you've heard about as a potential funding source, that I wrote about 5 or 6 years ago is a consumptive water use fee. When you look at the Susquehanna, all that water that's flowing downstream is the common property of all the people. Article 1, Section 27 of our Pennsylvania Constitution guarantees the right to that water to the people that own it, and that's all of us. My article was called Highway Robbery, and I made the case that we're giving that water away every day, and we should be able to evaluate the value of that water and then seek compensation for the water from the people that are using it and consumptively using it, not returning it back to our streams and rivers. So with Andrew, I'd like to thank you and the coalition for this. It's an extremely important funding source for us. We don't get much money from the legislature. Our revenue comes from angler and boater license fees and the excise tax on sport fishing and boating equipment, but the money that we do get from the Growing Greener initiatives allows us to keep our infrastructure repaired and operating, whether it's fish hatcheries or high hazard dams. It's the Commonwealth's infrastructure, and we operate and manage it for the Commonwealth, and we really appreciate all the interest in getting Growing Greener 3 done.
Great. Thank you, John.
Thanks.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Next up is David Kinney. He is the Mid-Atlantic Policy Director for Trout Unlimited. Hey, David. How long have you been in this position?
About 8 months.
8 months. Welcome to Harrisburg.
I used to be a newspaper reporter. I'm more comfortable on the other side. Thanks for organizing this, and thanks for the co-sponsors. We support Growing Greener for a lot of reasons, but I just want to give you a case study. Trout Unlimited does stream restoration projects across the country. One of our signature projects at the national level is here in Pennsylvania. It involves abandoned mine drainage remediation. And we've been working on that for 17, 18 years. And the funding for that, the seed money for that, came from Growing Greener. We've received $4.4 million since the program's inception. And what's interesting is that we've taken that money and leveraged it to get grants from the state and locals, combined it with volunteer hours and staff time. And for every $1 we get another $2 in matching funds, and so it's tripling that investment, and that's the real benefit of programs like this, is seeding the work that we do, and we can do it quicker and usually more affordable than government can do it on its own. So we support this program.
Great. Thank you very much. As you all can see, we have a great crowd here from Philadelphia. Thank you so much for coming out. Your executive director, George Matysik, has helped immensely over the last couple weeks in organizing this event. I want to introduce him to the podium. There you are. There you are, George. Thanks. Appreciate you coming.
Good morning, everybody.
Thanks.
Good morning, everybody. There's a lot of talk with Growing Greener about a few terms like conservation, protection, and growth. And while we think about these terms in the context of the natural environment, we also want to think about them in terms of our communities, the conservation of our neighborhoods, the protection of our kids, the growth of our economy. These are things that we can do through Growing Greener legislation by investing in the spaces that invest in our communities. Last Growing Greener legislation, more than 250 community spaces were impacted by this legislation, and we can continue to see the investment directly in our communities where it's most needed. So we'd urge our House and Senate members to sponsor this legislation and to keep Pennsylvania growing greener. Thank you.
Great. Trying to see who's here. Okay. Some are still coming. Great. Jackie Manomo is the Executive Vice President and COO of Penn Future, and she is our next speaker. There you are. Thanks, Jackie. I'll be happy to. Thanks.
Hello, everybody. Yesterday, I spent 8 hours in the car to reacquaint myself with the Pennsylvania wilds, a really beautiful part of our state that I spent a lot of time in when I worked for a land trust in the western part of the state. But I had not visited for a long time. So after 8 years of not visiting the wilds, I was thrilled to see the elk, the beautiful new visitor centers, the gorgeous scenery and clean water, including the Bennett's Branch, which was for all intents and purposes dead 8 years ago. Without Growing Greener, the significant tourism industry that's been seeded and sustained in that rural part of Pennsylvania and the jobs that come along with it would not be possible. No funding to clean up acid mine drainage or to protect land. Since the program began in 1999, Growing Greener has provided critical funding for natural resources here in Pennsylvania. The program and what it has accomplished is truly something for us to be very proud of. I've worked in 24 different states in the country, and I believe that this program is unique and an incredible asset to Pennsylvania. The state funds that Growing Greener has provided have been highly leveraged by funding from the private sector for projects large and small, in communities large and small, in every county of the state. And I think that's why we have the fantastic turnout that we do here today. The time has come to re-up Growing Greener. Without it, following through with our state's commitments to protecting both natural and working lands, improving drinking water and sewage systems, cleaning up polluted lands and water, helping farmers implement conservation practices that lead to clean water will be impossible. A source of significantly increased funding to restore the Susquehanna River must be found to avert a water crisis. We must act now to fund cleanup of the river's many sources of pollution, runoff from poor ag practices, mine drainage, toxic, heated discharges, failing septic systems. Funding from Growing Greener can go a long way to bring our sick Susquehanna back to health and life. We cannot count on the federal government to help, and we cannot stand back and do nothing. We know that state finances are tough, but these waters and these lands are the backbones of our two largest industries here in Pennsylvania and are what make Pennsylvania a beautiful place to live, work, and play. Clean waters, healthy communities, open lands matter and are worth having, so let's step up and make Growing Greener 3 a reality. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. Thank you, Jackie, and thank you to all the other speakers that were here today. Just want you to think about something and how bipartisan this program really is. Governor Ridge in 1999 with the General Assembly created Growing Greener. Governor Schweiker and the General Assembly in 2002 identified a dedicated source of revenue for the program in the state's tipping fee. Governor Rendell with the General Assembly in 2005 gave us Growing Greener 2. Governor Corbett with the General Assembly got us new increased dollars through the impact fee. I ask Governor Wolf and the General Assembly now, what will you do to keep Pennsylvania growing greener? We are urging the Governor and the General Assembly to act now to identify a bipartisan, sustainable funding source for Growing Greener so the state can continue to make the critical investments to protect our natural resources and keep our economy and our communities healthy. Thank you all for coming out. Over the next few weeks, we must continue this conversation with our legislators. Make your voice heard. Go to meetings in district offices, visit here in Harrisburg, email, reach out on social media, make phone calls. Let your senators, representatives, and the administration know that we must keep Pennsylvania growing greener. Thank you.